everybody. Welcome in. Let's get into this latest update on Chad Doerman, one of the sickest of fathers to walk the face of this earth, in my opinion. Last summer of 2023, he gunned down his 3 boys and murdered them execution style. His lawyers want his confession thrown out of court, saying that the police ignored his request for counsel. And with that, let's get into it.
Parents in the community reacted to the news of the shooting last night as well.
I have 9, 7, 3, and a newborn. There is nothing my kids have ever done or could ever do that would make me want to take their life. Do they make me mad? On a daily basis. That's every parent on the planet. If you don't have a kid, you'll understand one day. Kids drive you nuts, they push your buttons, but there's nothing they could ever do to make me want to shoot them. Nothing.
I just seen the kids out playing yesterday, like the little boy was riding his go-kart like he does all the time. They were good kids. He was just a very angry man. Like he just was always yelling at his wife and his kids, and you just really don't pay no.
Chad Doerman's lawyers filed an 18-page motion to suppress some of Chad Doerman's statements to deputies and healthcare professionals. When Chad Doerman was in court on Wednesday, the judge listened to testimony from several Clermont County Sheriff's deputies, some who were the first to interact with Chad Doerman on that day. The deputies were questioned about what they said to and asked Chad Doerman that day and how he responded. Well, most of us saw the police body cam footage of when they arrived at Chad Doerman's house with the 3 babies deceased and Chad sitting on the front doorstep of his house with a gun next to him. Before we get into the fact of Chad Doerman's lawyers and why they want his confession thrown out, I really don't think that is going to make a difference. But if Chad Doerman's Miranda rights were violated, then that's an issue. In my opinion, only because he had the right to remain silent. And if he did, in which he claims, and it seems to be, that he asked for his lawyer and they didn't stop. Let's just go over quickly what was said while he was still at the scene of the crime and what the detectives said in the interrogation. And putting the heinous crime aside, did they violate this monster's Miranda right? I hope not. The judge has yet come back with a decision, so let's see what he's making his decision on. And before anyone jumps down my throat, I only say this because I would hate to go through a trial and a mistrial, a hung jury, or something happens due to the fact that the police and the detectives did not handle Chad Doerman under Ohio laws, and they had their feelings involved, which I can understand. I could not imagine showing up to a scene with 3 babies deceased. If you look at the death row statistics across the 50 states, you will see that Ohio loves the capital punishment. And if anyone deserves to be on death row, in my opinion, Chad Doerman is definitely on the top of my list. Let's start on the horrible day of June 15th, 2023. 2 of the first deputies that arrived on the scene at Laurel Lindale Drive were on the stand last Wednesday. They both testified describing the moments depicted in body cam footage released shortly after the murders. And most of us have seen it. If you have not, I do have that on my page. Chad Doerman's lawyers pointed out at some point a detective arrived on the scene who used aggressive language toward Chad Doerman. Both deputies confirmed having heard the detective's comments.
A detective by the name of Detective Schubert. Yes, ma'am.
All right. And did Detective Schubert specifically come by the cruiser?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And did Detective Schubert ask you something at that point?
He asked if that was Mr. Doerman in the back of the car.
Okay. And are those the words he used?
I think he says that motherfucker in the back of the car.
Now, did Detective Schubert say anything else to you?
He said, shut the door before I kill that motherfucker.
One of the officers involved in interrogating a Chad Doerman, although he was not called in to speak during the hearing. And now, I probably would have said something worse than that, but this may be an issue. Let's jump into the courtroom. I am just going to go over a couple of things regarding the dismissal of Chad Doerman's confession. In the interrogation room with Mike Ross, the other detective that wants to kill Chad Doerman. So Mike Ross takes the stand last Wednesday, the detective that's leading the Chad Doerman interrogation. The defense attorneys specifically targeted Ross' handling of Chad Doerman's Miranda rights at the beginning of the interrogation. Chad Doerman did not sign a printed waiver of his Miranda rights. Detective Ross instead delivered the Miranda reading verbally. Reading from a card, he said in court. The attorney asked, "You did not read all the Miranda rights on your card, did you?" Detective Ross said, "Word for word, no." The attorney asked, "Well, you left out some pretty important parts, didn't you?" Detective Ross says, "No, I think I covered the important parts." And he understood that he had the right to an attorney and that he had the right to an attorney if he could not afford one. Those are the important parts. The attorney asked, "You did say you have a right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions, but the part on the card goes on to say, and to have a lawyer with you during questioning. You did not read that part, did you?" Detective Ross said, "No." See, in my opinion, this is where problems come, because if they did not handle his Miranda rights correctly to cause an issue in his trial, that would be pretty messed up. Chad Doerman's attorney goes on to say, while Detective Ross informed Chad Doerman he would be provided an attorney if he could not afford one, he failed to read a portion of the card that says if Chad Doerman could not afford one, one would be appointed before any questioning. Detective Ross replies, "I'm not a robot," in response to questions about why hadn't Detective Ross just read the Miranda rights card in its entirety. Detective Ross said he already believed that Chad Doerman was willing to speak with him because earlier, before the Miranda rights were read, Chad Doerman had already verbally and non-verbally said when asked if officers could speak with him. Around 5 minutes later in the interview with Detective Ross, Chad Doerman brought up wanting to wait for a lawyer. Chad Doerman said, "I'll wait for a lawyer. I really don't know. Give me a couple of days and let me talk to a lawyer so I can get nice, good answers." Detective Ross says, "I understand. Do you have a lawyer?" Chad Doerman says, "We have family members that are lawyers." The detective, "Who is that? Is there somebody I can call?" Chad Doerman, "Keith Doerman." Detective, "Is he related to you?" Chad Doerman, "Yes." Detective, "How is Keith related to you?" Chad Doerman, "My dad, Ruby Franklin. She is in the CIA." Detective, "Is she a lawyer? Is Ruby a lawyer?" Chad Doerman, "She is in the CIA." Detective, "I know. I heard you say that, but I didn't know maybe if she was a CIA attorney or, but you said your dad is a lawyer?" Chad Doerman, "We have a family lawyer." Detective, "All right, but you don't know who that is?" Chad Doerman, "No." This is my opinion, but I really think that this detective definitely did not. I just don't think that he played fair ball right there. I think that Chad was asking for a lawyer. The detective then says, "I don't know," just after mentioning a lawyer and his inability to name a lawyer he wanted to call. Chad Doerman's intent to request counsel was not clear at the time. That part, I beg to differ. Just more things that are not done by the book that are going to prolong this a monster from going to trial. Chad Doerman's lawyer says, "I mean, you don't think the rule is if he doesn't name a lawyer, he doesn't get one, do you? Pointing out the public defender's office could have been contacted if Chad Doerman did not already have a lawyer he could name. Detective Ross again said he believed Chad Doerman had muddled the waters by saying he didn't know and mentioning people who were not lawyers. Chad Doerman's lawyer says multiple others testified on the stand in court, specifically to incidents following Detective Ross's testimony. Multiple others testified on the stand in court, specifically to incidents where deputies with the Clermont County Jail recorded meetings between Chad Doerman and medical or mental health professionals through their worn body cameras. Ultimately, Chad Doerman's attorneys claim those officers violated his right to privacy by inserting themselves into what should have been private, confidential discussions and recording them. At the conclusion of the hearing, Judge Richard Ferenc said he would review each side's case over the next month. The judge said there are several things he'd need to consider before deciding if Chad Doerman's confession or recordings made of him with the medical staff would be considered admissible in court. Specifically, he said he'd need to research whether HIPAA is a constitutional right like Miranda right, and whether rights to privacy provided by HIPAA extend to inmates at all times. He adds, I think the law is clear. They don't surrender all their privacy rights when they walk through a jail door. No, and if you do not know, Chad Doerman faces 21 separate charges connected to his alleged actions on June 15, 2023. 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault, being held on a $20 million bond. And I am very curious to know what you guys think about Chad Doerman, Miranda rights being violated, and that we don't need. We need this monster to get the death penalty. What he did, I mean, my gosh, he is just angry, mean. I don't know what he is. Did he snap? And then you have to think after the Miranda right issues, he's probably going to go through his mental evaluation issues. Drop your thoughts, guys. Arrest in heaven, babies. A gone too soon. Another senseless crime. With the rumor that his wife was going to leave him. But with that, guys, it is a wrap. Everybody, I thank you for coming in. Please make sure you click that like, the subscribe, and the bell for notifications so you do not miss the next time we drop a video and or go live. Everybody, have a good day or a good night wherever you are in the world, and stay vigilant. I am out.